Hello and welcome to Man Enough. I am Justin Baldoni here with
Jamie Heath
and the amazing
Liz Plank
with a very special guest, my brother Shawn Mendes.
How are you?
You need no introduction, but let me do it just for fun. Shawn Mendes, you got your start by posting song covers on Vine. Does anyone remember Vine? You're old enough to remember Vine, right?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
not nearly old.
You never. Okay. You have other things to do. That was back in 2013. Your first album topped the U.S. Billboard 200 charts, making you one of only 5 artists to do this before the age of 18. Ridiculous. Your second studio album, Illuminate, also debuted at #1 because you're Shawn Mendes, of course. And last of December, you became the youngest male artist ever to top the Billboard charts with 4 studio albums. I've never had to actually read because it's just so.
Is it awkward for you?
Incredible.
It's I don't know what it is.
I'm not even done, by the way.
Sorry.
I'm just getting started. Your music and your videos have been streamed billions of times with a B. With a B. And you have an amazing partner.
I do.
That needs no introduction either. We hope she maybe comes on at one point.
She'll be
Camila
here.
Cabello.
She loves you guys.
We love her too.
So tell us why we're here. Why is he here? Why did we invite
Shawn Mendes?
This guy that's...
All right, so there is a backstory.
Yeah.
So I was writing the book. I was actually in kind of a dark place. I don't know if you felt this when you were writing your book, but it's strange to be writing a book about being man enough while not feeling man enough to write it. And I was having a day where I was like, why the hell am I doing this? I was like, is any man going to actually read this? Is this only going to be like the TED Talk where just women share it and then men bash on it? And I was just feeling super down. And I had said some prayers and I was trying to get past it. And when you're writing, you kind of can apologize in your writing. So I was writing and I'm like, nah, delete. And then my phone dings and it's a DM from Shawn Mendes. And I actually write about it in the book. I don't name you. And I asked your permission if I could.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if it's when you're saying a prayer, you're meditating and you get this ding and you get the answer that you needed. And Shawn DM'd me. Remember what you said?
I just finished watching the TED Talk that my girlfriend actually sent to me. And I was thinking about the women in my life, and I was thinking about my hairstylist and my stylist. And 3 days before, we were shooting my album cover, so we were nonstop shooting, and it was tons of moving parts, and I was just taking a real moment to just you said something about what ends up happening is you end up hurting the women you love most, the women closest to you, like your wife. And I thought about my girlfriend and my mom and my hairstylist and my makeup artist. And I thought about the last few days and how my team is a lot of men in it. And we can just be really bossy and kind of horrible, you know? And I like to think that my team is a bunch of amazing people. And I really do believe their hearts are so amazing, but in the middle of stress and when something seems to have all this pressure on it, it seems that they get the brunt of it, you know? And I felt really horrible. So I messaged them. I just texted them being hey guys, I just wanted to remind you how important you are. And I know that you guys just take the brunt of all of our stress and you're so tough and brave. And it's I was really thinking about it as if I was them, I would have quit, you know, multiple times. And they both replied basically being I'm in tears, you know, how much I needed to hear that. And that was a real kind of turning moment. So I texted my mom and I got the same reaction. And I was this is really kind of the main point. This is what male privilege is. You have no idea it's even happening until you know.
And him doing that and messaging me on that day makes me want to cry. Well, here we go. Because I don't know. You don't know. You don't know when you do something when you're trying to reach men and then you're labeled all the things I've been labeled, if you ever will reach men. And the fact that it reached you and then you had that response, and then even though a woman sent you the TED Talk, which is what I go back to, is women influence us. Your girlfriend saw it, influenced you to watch it, and then you did that, and that gave me so much hope, bro. That a man with your privilege, you sit at the intersection of whiteness and male privilege, and yet you were willing to do that. And then you messaged me at a place when I was at a time when I like needed it the most. And it like gave me the strength to keep going because everyone just thinks like, oh, all right, you're fine. You do this, you would do a podcast, you write. And I'm sure people feel the same way about your music and you, Liz, and the same stuff. And nobody ever sees the iceberg. Nobody ever sees what's underneath and like the self-doubt and the wondering if this is all in vain and like if anyone will ever listen. So
it's all in vain.
So thank you.
And yeah, I think that I really, after that moment, realized my privilege in all senses. Like you said, I'm at the intersection of where the maximum amount of privilege lies. And being able to even grow up with parents who allow me to explore these things and explore my sensitivity and explore emotions, even that they might not even understand from their generation, is privilege. And it allows me to, and there's something in your book that you actually said, which I can't repeat exactly how you wrote, but you said something about how the amount of privilege I have more than people who don't have means I have to work
that much
harder than those people for equality. And that changed my life. Like that was like, there's days when you're working for clout, for instance, like as a musician, like you want to have a big song and you want people to think you're super talented. You want people to think that you're amazing. And those days are too often. There's too many of those days. And comes a moment where something kind of connects with you and you realize that you have so much more energy to work and stand up for something that's bigger than you.
Well, let me ask you something. So you're super impressive, 22-year-old, talented. I mean, we got your music in the house. My son's a big fan, as I am as well. I also come from your world, the music world. I'm curious what you do as a young, amazing, privileged to be doing what you do, to be making money, to be white, and to not be female. Speaking a little bit what you said, what do you feel that you are doing tangibly in our business, which then will, of course, affect other parts?
Well, this is something that needs to be talked about more. The work that you have to put into figuring out how to do your unique, specific purpose and what that means for you. You know, you don't, like somebody goes, you have to have purpose to be successful. It's really hard to figure out what that purpose is and how you're going to help and make a change, you know. And I spent a lot of time, you know, working with a friend of ours, Jay Shetty.
Yeah, Jay's coming on.
Jay's coming on, and he's amazing. And I think I talked to him about this a lot. And I think you have to really find where your strengths are and your kind of individual method. And something that I always have believed in and really has always kind of caused me anxiety in the same light because I never really wanted to follow it was telling the truth, you know, I mean, I'll be completely honest, when you start off in the music industry, you get a person who trains you to speak in front of media. They train you how to speak. They train you how to deflect questions that may make you look bad, although they need to be answered. They train you how to do this stuff. And you're scared. You're terrified to say the wrong thing. You're terrified so much so that you forget that saying the wrong thing leads you to being corrected, which leads you to fighting for something bigger than yourself. And getting to that place has taken so many years and having so many amazing people around me, you know? So I'm really at the point now where like, I want to tell my truth and be corrected and then say that as my truth.
And before you came on, that's literally what he said.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm here to tell the truth and I'm open to anything. And man, at 22, to be willing to do that.
Okay, so what you just gave was wonderful.
Yes.
But still didn't quite answer.
Tangibly, the amount of people who are listening, I want to keep that to be able to spread the word to the most amount of people. So for me, it's really about completely diving into uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable situations where I can be corrected so that I can learn. And then when the time comes to get onto Jimmy Fallon, I stand there with stillness in my body because I've been corrected. I know what it feels like to be uncomfortable, and I know that I'm standing for something bigger than myself. So right now I'm in the learning process and doing things like this, you know, like long form conversations I think are so amazing for tackling big subjects. So learning continuing to learn, and then realizing something that was told to me by Kez, my tour manager. I was writing a caption for something, and I was like, people were like, the word, and I was like, I don't know, should I switch the word? And he's like, look, you just always have to tell the truth. This is it. You cannot just lie because you're afraid of what people might think. You have to tell your truth as it is, and your truth might not be the right one, but you will be corrected, and that will become your new truth.
Wow.
And that's kind of where I stand now, so.
And is there a time where you were corrected or where you had that discomfort?
Yeah, I think it's not even necessarily having to be moments of, they don't have to be these massive kind of catalyst moments. They're small moments. I mean, I remember at one point I had this crazy belief that like, because I had a girlfriend in high school and she like struggled with her left and rights. And I was like, she always had to hold up her hands before she turned left and right. And then I knew another couple girls who did that too. And I was like, I remember saying this in front of my stylist and a makeup artist, I think women have a problem with left and rights. And they both were like, what? And I was like, no, I really think like I did a study on it. Like I'm a science. I knew like 2 girls who did this in the car, and that's why I believe that. And then immediately I was like, that was definitely not right. And it's like they didn't take them being like, this is a catalyst. It was a subtle feeling, and you can learn from that.
Yeah, and I love that this conversation between you and Justin prompted you to interact with the women in your life in a different way and sort of tackle that sexism that was, either overt or covert. And what I also love about you is that you also talk a lot about masculinity, right? For you, this isn't just about, amplifying women and making sure that we treat and we respect women, but also I think you have a depth of understanding of this conversation, which I did not have at the age of 22. And one way that I think it really shows up is in all these like gay rumors, these like so-called gay rumors. First of all, and I heard you talk about it, and you were like, I don't know what to do with that, because if I say, well, I'm not gay, then it's like, well, am I saying it's bad to be gay, right? And that's what's implied, in the internalized homophobia in our society. But what I find really, when I was listening to that, first of all, I hadn't never heard about that. And then I was like listening to you naming the reasons, because you cross your legs, you like are conscious of how much space you take. You have great hair. You're calm, you're nice, you're sensitive. And I was like, women love that. like women are actually, those are all things that women are very attracted to. So who says that that's gay?
But
right?
I also think most men would spend an extra little bit of time on their hair if they grew up in a house where their dad didn't tell them to stop fussing on their hair. Like my dad could see me in the mirror playing with my hair and talking about my hair, and he would never say anything about it. It was just like,
that's a great point.
I know friends who like, they can't look at themselves for 10 seconds in the mirror because growing up, it was like, why are you looking at yourself? So it's like I said, that's another layer of privilege. Like when I always talking about privilege, like I'm a white male, but I also stand in a place where I was raised free to be sensitive. I was free to at 20. That's why, in another place, it's like when you go at 22, I didn't know these things. Like that's another clear showing of my privilege right there, to be able to at 17 be able to have these conversations and to have people really truly want to talk about these things with me.
You do all this research on Shawn and you find no problems, right? He's fairly unproblematic, right? He's a Paul Rudd. And it's what's interesting, and it just makes me like, it also makes me so sad, is how few, and I'm going to lump myself in there for the time being until, I become problematic, or maybe this podcast something will happen. But how that's rare, and like why that's so rare for us men to be quote unquote unproblematic, right? To be at an intersection of privilege and yet to not have any scandals.
There's a lot
or
there's a lot of
be clean.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a lot of like, I think we all have a very strong moral compass on the inside of our hearts. And like going back to meditation, like the more you can clear your head, the more you're aware to that moral compass, And there's a lot of things that people do out of courtesy and habit like you guys have all done with me coming here, whether it's, you know, commenting on how I look or commenting on how kind I am or commenting like on the successes I've had, that is so habitual and so kind, but also adding to part of where that problem is, you know? And I think there's always this feeling that you get in your chest when somebody says something like, how have you not messed up? That you're like, how is that statement really even relevant? Because I feel like that all of a sudden makes the normal to mess up, like to be bad or to make the wrong choices, where it should be pushing towards, you know. But it feels like, I don't know how to explain it so well. I'm kind of butchering it.
No, you're explaining it well. It's just it's something that I've for sure felt.
Yeah.
Instead of a pressure to be a good human, it's a pressure to not mess up. And again, that's a longer conversation.
Yeah.
But I think also what we can admit is that most men, all of us, have not been perfect and have messed up past and have made big mistakes. I think the biggest difference, and maybe the biggest difference is that we're willing to learn.
Yeah.
And to hear it, you know. And so, look, in the event a scandal happened or in the event something came out, I'm imagining you'd address it head on.
Absolutely. And going back to privilege, we have the privilege to go head on with these things and the privilege to talk about it. Like, it's so complex. Life is so complex. And I think that the more you get into focusing on love, the more you just have this insane amount of compassion for everybody, no matter how horrible they may seem on the outside, because from like a relationship you've had to the way your parents were, to an uncle, to a coach, to a teacher, to anybody in your life could have had a push into being that way. You know what I mean? And who controls that? Like, why is it that when I was in high school, I had one teacher tell me that I had to play rugby. I had to be on the rugby team. And I had another teacher tell me I can do whatever I want. And I had another teacher tell me I can't play rugby because I can't mess up my pretty face, because that's going to be what makes me money. Like, why is it that the teacher that I ended up listening to was the one that was like, you can kind of just do whatever? Like, there's no reasons for these things. It's just kind of the way things turn out. And there comes a point where something hits you like a catalyst and you're like, okay, well, I get to start making the decisions from here on out on what I learn about and how I confront it. And that's the moment that it starts becoming very obvious that you can see people's privileges and the people that have been having an easier life and the people that haven't, because they will have a harder time telling the truth than I have, because they've been hurt more than I have.
What kind of, with all that, what kind of man does that make you want to be? Ultimately,
I think,
especially with all the privilege that you have.
Yeah.
How do you see, like, this is the man I want to walk and other men to look at me as? Yeah,
I mean, I think it's like Justin talks about it in the book, and he says there's this dying desire to have men approve of you. And that's like, you know, when you walk into a house and you don't drink alcohol, but a guy offers you a beer, like to turn down that beer is so hard. Yeah, man. Because you're like, that's such a disrespectful thing, you know? And that's a one thing of so many ways of doing it. But for me, it's like, there's so much truth in being vulnerable and being successful in being vulnerable, and being successful in fighting for equality, and being successful in telling the truth. And I think that there's been this whole Americanized thing that has been like, we all have to be Superman. And, you know, this is why I completely love people like Jay, because you can see that Jay is like, I'm going to make being vulnerable and like people like you, I'm going to make being vulnerable and telling the truth the new Superman. Yeah. And like, that takes as much effort as the people put into making masculinity. You know what I mean? You have to be working as hard or harder than the people who worked for masculinity. And I've always been extremely driven, like massively driven. And the more I learn about how I can help, that drive just gets stronger and stronger, because my fear lessens. I told Justin, I was never born into religion. I was kind of grown up as an atheist. My mom believed in God, but as I've gotten older, there's a faith and a belief in people's eyes when this is the simplest way I can put it, when they stand for something big, larger than themselves. And the more I connect with that certainty that if I'm working towards helping others and working towards something bigger than me, literally I can sit here right now so much calmer and so much more fearless because I'm here for that.
What terrifies you the most? What are you the most afraid of?
So my girlfriend has this joke where she thinks I have this legitimate thing where I cannot lie. Like I'm incapable of lying. And it's kind of become funny, but also kind of weird for me because I know I can lie, you know, but also I do tell the truth to an extreme amount. And so I get worried when I come on and talk, you know, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say. But I mean,
feel that
yeah,
so much.
I told her the other day, I said something, I raised my voice at her. And she was like, I don't like when you raise your voice. Like, why did you raise your voice? And I got so defensive. I was like, I wasn't like raising my voice at you. Like, and I did raise my voice at her. And then I felt her shrink and I felt me grow. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the worst. This is like, I'm so terrified of being evil. I'm so scared to be bad. I don't want to be bad. And I had to get in this massive conversation with her. Like, I literally just got so defensive because I'm terrified of being called evil or bad, or maybe there even is bad inside of me. And I have to just accept that exists. And that other part of me, he's just got to be here. And we just got to work together until eventually he gets worked in, all of the trauma and all the kinks get rubbed out of him and he's okay. But I can't avoid the fact that like there's a little bit of darkness inside of me, and letting that darkness kind of be present is a horrible feeling.
So I want to ask you, so that Liz doesn't have to ask you. I'm picking up on a couple of things, Liz. So that's sweet to share that. What I heard was you raised your voice.
Yes.
Which you don't want to do.
No.
She expressed her displeasure with it.
Mm-hmm.
You then became defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Did you move to apologizing and correcting it, or did you make it about you and that now I don't want to be that and there's this evil in me, and now she had to comfort you in your
That's what I did.
wrongdoing?
That's what I did. The second one. I made it about my evil and my fear, and she comforted me. And then it took me like 20 minutes of us separately reading our books to be able to come back to her, to be like, God, that was a whole thing, and I'm really sorry.
Because that's what we got to be better.
Wow.
Well,
Right?
that's what we got. But 20 minutes is like, okay, I'm trying to shorten that gap, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
and that's like a real that's the thing. We're aware of it.
Oh yeah.
We're aware of it. You think you're being vulnerable and saying the right thing, but you're really just defending yourself even better.
Right.
And I think this is where this is so important, right? And it can be really frustrating when you're having a conversation about hurting with a man who you're in a relationship with, who you love, who's committed to this ideal of being a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, because there's so many bad guys, right? You're like, I'm not that guy. And I get that fear.
You got it. You're right on.
Right?
You're right on.
But then by being so committed
Afraid,
to being that good guy, you actually
become the
can
bad
become
guy.
the bad guy.
Yep.
But what I heard you say before, and it seems like maybe that's where you're transitioning to in terms of your masculinity and your identity, it seems like your masculinity is really connected to service instead of an individual journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey that's like, where am I going with other people?
I mean,
or for
I think
other people?
for me, with the really extremely limited amount of knowledge I have about spirituality and service and what that consists of, I know that it's selfish, because the more that I give in that light, the more I receive the thing that I always want, which is just to be calm and to just be feeling good, like, and to feel okay, you know. And I receive that the more I'm focusing on like a bigger thing than myself, you know.
Right.
This is really important to talk about, because being committed to being that good guy, which I know the good guys, I know them, they have the same energy as me, and I can see it in their eyes, I can see the whole thing going on. That can really make you the bad guy, and because you can become so manipulative in the
As the
way
good
of being
guy.
the good guy.
I think it's not about be the good guy. It's about like, let's get rid of this binary of good guy, bad guy, right? And just be yourself. Is that hard? You took a deep breath.
I think that there's like, I mean, I don't know. I'm coming from my perspective. I really think that we all have like this a big piece of darkness in us, like, and we all have something being motivated from an ego dark place. And the more we try to act like that doesn't exist, even if we're doing it in ways of meditation or prayer or anything, the more we suppress it, and it just becomes stronger when it does shine. You know,
because you're
You
afraid
better
of it, you're
speak that.
avoiding
That
it.
is the truth.
In the
Right.
Baha'i faith, we have this idea, and I know you and I have talked a bit about faith and your journey and my journey and shared quotes and stuff. And we have this idea of God has created us, and we have a higher and a lower nature. The lower nature is the material world. I'm touching the desk. It's everything.
Ego.
It's our ego.
Animalistic.
It's the animalistic part of ourselves. It's our lower nature. And I believe, at least what we're taught, is that it's about acknowledging your lower nature and living in your higher nature, which is the spirit. It's your heart. It's that connection between your heart and something greater than yourself. It's living in service. It's not saying the lower nature doesn't exist.
No.
It's
or is it saying that
acknowledging
it's
it.
bad?
yeah,
Or is
it
it,
is.
or is it
just
saying
is.
it's not a binary? It just is. The entire world has been created. Animals have a lower nature. Yet if you look at animals, oftentimes they're better than humans, right?
Yeah.
But it's the higher nature.
Animals stick to their nature.
Animals stick to their nature.
Yeah.
As we have a desire, I believe, human beings, to live in our higher nature, yet our lives become the battle of the two. So at the end of it, it's about acknowledging it and doing everything you can to wake up every day and to figure out how I can live in the higher nature while not also like hating myself and judging myself and like living in my shame when I dip into my
complex.
lower nature. Because if we look at the material world, the world as the entire world is set up to
make us stay there.
to make us stay in our lower nature.
And by the way, that's such a good point. It's so gendered because women are encouraged to only be in their higher nature, right? We glamour like motherhood and these are our saviors, but we treat them like shit and we don't pay them and we don't recognize their work, and right? But they're these like, right, higher goddesses. It's like superior gender that's supposed to just like do everything. And men are rewarded when they act out of ego.
Because they're considered like it's the same thing with the darkness. It's even like watching Game of Thrones, for instance. Like it's just like all men are indulging in rape, and that's the show, and that's the system. And the men who don't are like, wow, you must be a god in the show, you know. And but it's actually such a statement for what it
It's taking.
Yeah.
Just like taking everything. We're rewarded. for
Killing
taking.
things.
Can I support this with data? Because it's my favorite
Please,
thing to
do it.
One of my favorite pieces of data is on narcissism. Okay, so narcissists, the 60 to 70% of people who are narcissists in our society are men, but there is nothing that makes men that is biological or neurological or hormonal. That makes men more likely to be narcissists, to be born narcissists. So in reality, an equal number of women and men are born with narcissism. But what happens is that our culture, I believe, this is the part that I believe that our culture rewards men who are narcissists. We love.
We do, of course we
They're
do.
leaders.
They're the
competent. They know
Fortune
what they're
500.
doing. Yep.
Yeah.
And we do not reward women who are narcissists, right? Even if you think about some of the most famous women, I don't want to drop the Kardashians, but like they are business women. They're very famous, very successful, but they're called vain, right? They're diminished because of their narcissism, if that's what that is, or those traits that they exhibit. So it's really interesting how we really set everyone up to fail, right? And if we had a different culture, I would love if I could create a little petri dish of humans and take out the masculine, the idealized masculinity, take out the sexism, take out the patriarchy, take out all those things, and just see would there be an equal amount of people who develop this? So I'm just, I think about that internal struggle that you're talking about between whether you call it higher self, lower self, darkness and lightness. And how masculinity confines you to the darkness a little bit.
And I want to tie it back to something which I loved, and I sing it over and over. Is you're starting to now tackle that in your music a little bit, which is really, really cool. You're finding a way to weave some of these themes that we're talking about here into pop songs, one of my favorite lines, and I'm going to butcher it, even though it's one of my favorite lines, is
You butchered so much of your book already.
no, you haven't. You actually, trust me, I felt insecure. You like said it better than I like wanted to go back and like, shit, I should have wrote it the way Shawn said it. The line about being conditioned, why when I cry in
my hands,
into
am
my
I
hands,
conditioned to feel like I'm less of a man? Yeah.
And just that, it's so simple, right? For like Liz Plank
Every
and
man
feminists,
I know,
it's-
by the way, has replied to me about that line.
right?
Yeah.
And it's such
Privately.
Privately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Privately.
Very privately.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah, right. Which is, I mean, even
You
that's
know.
how even
That's
you and
how
I
I reached out to you.
That's how you reached out to me.
And you
But-
talk about your TED Talk too, that you got all these private messages.
Oh
from
yeah,
men,
so
but
men
not
dragged
publicly.
me. Facebook posted like the 2-minute version, which was like the like the Me Too part of it. 50 million views later, all men were dragging me, and then privately it was like, yo, bro, hey.
This is the not all men I want.
Thank
not
you.
all men
It's
like
not all
are
men.
anti.
It's not all men, but there's a public and a private, right? So anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I want to know a little bit about what you're now doing with your music, and are you going to do more of this?
Yeah, I
is
mean-
this something you're exploring? What's that like?
I mean, I jumped right into, writing songs, and then I had a really huge song when I was really young, and then somehow wrote another really huge song when I was super young, and then another one after that, and none of that was coming from a knowing place. At least I had no idea what was going on. It was just like all kind of happening. Only in the last like 2 years I've realized like the real power that music is. And there's something so interesting because I grew up kind of more or less atheist, and now becoming much more spiritual and really being sure there's a God, or sure there's a higher thing, and there's the universe, or whatever you like to call it. Music was the thing that did that for me. Watching Maverick City Choir, I think they're called Maverick City Choir, singing about God, singing about Jesus. I'm sitting there watching this YouTube video, and they're singing about Jesus, and I just start crying my eyes out. And I'm like, when you're crying and it's like, this is like something leaving me.
Yeah.
This is like that type of cry. It's like, and I'm like, how is something that my whole life I've grown up to believe is fanatic and not science and not the truth feel like home because of this song? And then I started listening to not hymns, like mantras,
Yeah.
and the same feeling, this feeling of home. And I'm listening to mantras in the morning while I'm like stretching, and I'm like, what is this thing?
Like Kundalini type mantras?
Or like what are they called? I don't know exactly the word for them, but just the songs from India,
Yeah.
There's really truly a way that music gets to the soul and creates some. I'm stealing this from the words of Pharrell's uncle in the Netflix series that he just released.
Sweet.
He says, music makes words that people don't want to hear out loud in speech more palatable.
That's right.
It's so much easier to digest through song.
Do you hope to change men with your music?
I'm not giving a pointed like who I want to change. I think my belief is that all humans are inherently good. I think we're all born inherently good. And I think from conditioning of life and trauma and whatever comes your way kind of creates this version of you, whether you're happy with it or not. And I think that like we were talking about, music is the latter. And if I can just give people that moment of intimacy and glimpse into their own self, where they're like, hey, I could maybe like just spark that little spark of light of reflection. Maybe they'll be like, hey, maybe I should just like do this one little thing and change.
Well,
I
like the question that you asked about, do you have a incentive to possibly change men or help men? And you want to help all people and touch people. But I'm going to challenge you with something. Because this is what I see. I see a dude right now that we need to be universally massive, which you are doing. Why? Because the way that you sit in your skin, even though I know you have anxiety, which you've talked about it before, I can see it sometimes. The way that you play with the microphone, those are all
they're anxious twitches.
Those are all anxious twitches. But you're here knowing that you have them in front of a camera, making it okay for other men and other boys to think that's a weakness.
Yes.
You're showing that you can be in that and you're still a man. Your humble posture and your sweet voice.
Thank you.
And not this big, loud talk like I seem to always go to. is manly, is masculine as well. So to Liz's question, because you're a man and you're 22, and you are saying that I'm finding God or finding a spiritual something greater than yourself, you're giving other boys and other men permission to also search and to acknowledge and be humble. So I'm challenging you to find in your heart that, yes, you want to touch all people, but to know that you are indeed an influence on other men and boys.
And I think that's so important that you said that to me, because I think, like, I really do believe we all have our individual strengths, and maybe mine lays there, you know, or one of them lays there, you know. I really appreciate that. I take that to heart, because it's just important to have that outside perspective too, you know. But the privilege is such a topic of conversation, because so many people can't even break through the first barrier, which is sometimes they say the wrong thing. Like they're like the smallest, simplest thing you start thinking about the second you realize that, you know, we are all human and we make mistakes. Like, so many people are so trapped in their conditioning that they cannot even get out to do one step in the right direction. And how do we break down that for people? How do we make that a common thing?
By you saying the wrong thing sometimes.
By saying the wrong thing.
And then showing up and saying, I said the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And yet I'm still here.
Sure,
and I'm going to try to correct it and show that you don't have to run. No. So that's what you do. You keep doing that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, you know, on the topic of your anxiety, I also have anxiety. But for women, I think, it's almost like my anxiety. Like it's just more common to talk about.
It's normal,
right? It's normal.
It's normalized, at least.
It's normalized. I mean, it's still, you know, mental health is still difficult to talk about and still stigmatized. But I think for men, it's even more, right? Like there's even more stigma. And so I'm curious, did you always know that you had, because also anxiety is like presents itself in all these different ways until you figure out what's going on. You're like, oh, this is what it is. Was it difficult for you? And do you think it's more difficult for men to sort of recognize how it shows up for them?
I mean, I couldn't say. I don't know. I don't know how it is for you, you know, and what anxiety is for women. But I think as a man, like I remember, like I really don't drink ever really anymore. But when I was like 17, I would drink so much, like too much for a 17-year-old. I was drinking like whiskey, like on my own in a hotel room. And I wrote about it, and I have a song called In My Blood, which is the beginning of my conversation with anxiety.
We wanted that for 5 Feet Apart.
You wanted that, yeah. And that was the beginning of the conversation for me. And that was literally like, the beginning there, I'm laying on the bathroom floor. I was laying on the bathroom floor. You know, I was literally like crying on the bathroom floor. And my parents would fly out instantly. And I'm sure that if they hear this or when they hear this, that will be heartbreaking for them to hear. But the masculinity in me did not let me call my mom or dad, you know. So
I've been there, man.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of my struggle. Like, so I read about my struggle with porn. And in a very similar way, like it's normal. Like it's normal for dudes. It's like this unwritten thing. Like,
it's
like you're just
pushed.
Oh yeah. Like,
I remember my 12th birthday.
And that's
They
the thing.
tried to do
12th birthday?
Yeah.
Wait. Let's go into that. What happened on your 12th birthday?
Oh, I just remember like the like 12 or 13 birthday. We're sitting there and they're like, "Have you masturbated yet?" And this is like, it's like funny, but it's funny because it's
true.
So uncomfortable to talk about.
Who asked you that?
My friends, like my friends, you know. I'm like, no, I haven't. And they was like, you got to do that, man. You got to do that. What are you doing? And I'm like, what do you got to do? Well, here's the website and here's the thing, and like go and use whatever and like go to the bathroom. And it was like it was like the conversation. Like I remember, like I'm just thinking about my friends hearing this, they're gonna die. But it's like the daily conversations. Like, oh, did you masturbate today? I was like, yeah, I masturbated today, of course. Now I was like, oh, how many times do you masturbate a week? I don't know, like 2. Dude, that's very weird. You should be masturbating every day.
What?
Like these are real conversations. This is not fake, and this is not only my friend group. I'm sure of that, you know. So it's
that's crazy. So I remember. So I had the opposite experience. So in some way, I was introduced to porn when I was like 10.
Yeah, that's so young.
And the data is showing that year after year, that age is getting younger and younger.
What can you?
And like,
how is that?
It's crazy.
Well, because you just flip
Because-
through
yeah.
Safari or YouTube, and it's
It's just all there. It's so with the advent of iPhones and all these things, so I'm 37 now, 15 years older than you. So for me, it was like, the guys had, dial-up internet. So it's not like,
Yeah,
and
you sit in your
but I
living
was
room.
introduced by two other guys who were 10.
Yeah.
But I remember I read about this experience in my book is like being kind of shamed into experiencing it before I was even ready. Like I couldn't even have an erection when I was like introduced to it. And here are these guys, they're a little bit older, one of my friends with older brothers, and he's got his dad's porn stash and all these things. And just like being thrown into something and being like, oh, like this is what you do. This is what dudes do. This is how you talk about women. This is like what makes you a man. You conquer, right? Like, have you hit that? And then Tony Porter talks a lot about like how language has evolved and how it's like how we smash that and then how we're devaluing women through all, but we're not taught that. We're just taught that this is what makes you a man. So then you grow up, and when you feel anxiety or shame or all of the things that we feel, and by the way, I have clearly my nervous tick 2 thing. Jamie always calls me on like, will you just keep the microphone in the same place, please? I'm like, no, Jamie, I'm nervous, okay? And then he can't say anything. But then you reach a point where then maybe it becomes an issue, right? Like your whiskey was. But I think what men experience, and I think the like invisible force that is masculinity is it's the thing that doesn't allow us to reach out and ask for help.
Oh, yeah.
It's the thing that made it impossible for me to tell my wife, who is the closest person in the world to me, and who had to take my buddies to Mexico. He was one of them, and still wasn't able to, because I felt like I couldn't share that at that point. Like there was something wrong with me.
It's crazy.
And it's just like, what would have happened
if you had that conversation?
If we would have had the conversation, what would have happened if it was normal, like as normal for women to maybe talk about feelings and anxiety, like what you just said?
Yeah, the comparison for women is interesting because it feels like men are thrown into being a sexual subject when they're still children, and women, girls, are thrown into being a sexual object when they're still children, right? So I remember the first time, it's a very different story, but I remember taking the bus and being in the 2nd grade and thinking, why are all these people staring at me? Is something wrong with me? Is there something in my teeth? Is there something in my hair? Am I wearing something weird? Yeah. And after a while, I started realizing, I remember like this vividly in the 8-year-old brain, being like, oh, it's men. The men are staring at me. And I am a sexual, like I understood myself as a sexual being. And I wasn't ready for that, but that was imposed
does that
onto
link,
me.
and that's then linked to negative, like so automatically your sexuality or your body is linked to like negative feelings with
negative
men.
feelings, and also that's when I was groped on the bus when I was 8 by this man. Like that's when it starts, right? And so it's so again, like everyone loses, right?
Everybody
like
loses.
You're a 10-year-old boy being like shown this porn, being like, you don't have erections, you don't know how to masturbate. And I'm a 10-year-old girl
being groped on the bus.
lured. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, can we just let everyone, like, first of all, be children, right? And these gender, right? Like we talk about gender stereotypes. It's almost like it doesn't state the urgency of this. Like this to me is like we're destroying like, children,
purity, innocence.
Yeah, exactly.
And
by
one of the first
these roles.
One of the first times, Emily, my wife, told me about a very similar experience. She remembered walking. I think it was just through school, and having the boys start to say like these sexual things to her, and she had no idea what it was. And then
you don't even know what it means.
So then you just start, and so she started to like, and you can only imagine. So then here we are as adults, right? So I have my insecurities as it relates to it. She has hers, and now we're like,
and they're massively going against each other.
and they're just like opposing
and then we
forces.
wonder,
and then we wonder.
It sets us up to fail. Like it sets up our relationships to fail.
And we don't know who to talk about it with. No one's ever. So I want to share something also, because I talk about it often only for the reason, especially when I'm someone like Man Enough, about being not brave, but that you're not less of a man. So I was molested, as I've said before, from 7. No one to talk to about it for many years, many, many years. And not until I was 49 did I maybe 48, did I come out and really admit it. Before that, I used to own it because it made me more manly to be like, yeah, man, when I was 7, I used to play with this woman, you know, and when I was, well, there was a middle section that I didn't. And then when I was a little older, then the same exact thing. I had to own it, even though things were happening to me, because I would be too weak or less of a man to admit. But what I started learning, but when you own something and when you finally say it, like, and then you go, wait, I don't have to be a coward. I'm not cowardly.
Take its power away.
Take its power away. And since I say that out loud, there's a bunch of men that have come to me that've been like, yeah, I was molested too. I was molested too. Oh, I don't have to walk with my back bent over anymore.
But it wasn't until, and it's funny being one of your best friends, it's in the last 5 years that I've heard any of our friends say the men say they were molested. And again, it comes down to like modeling it. Like you own it. As an example, like with me with porn, I own it. And then suddenly it takes away some of its power, but then you start to see the effect that it has on all these other men who I believe, and that's why we're doing this podcast, I believe we are all dying inside, waiting for someone like Shawn Mendes to write something as simple as like, why is it that when I cry in my hands, am I conditioned to feel like I'm less of a man? There's even that little thing. I feel like we're waiting for permission to be like, I feel that. Or I'm waiting for permission. 1 in 5 boys are molested. We're waiting for permission to be like, oh my God, me too. What do I do about it? It's making me do this. I'm acting out. I think I've become an abuser. What do I do about that now? How do I get help? Because you're trapped. You can't even get help. You don't know who to go to. You can't call your friends. You can't call your mom or your dad when you're on the floor because you're drinking whiskey. So the question becomes, what do we do?
Tell the truth.
What do we do?
You tell the truth. You keep telling your truth. That's all you can do. I think, and it's not all you can do, but I think it's massively important because you sit here and you tell your truth and it lets somebody be like, I can tell mine. He can tell his truth. You know, like even to like hear you say that, like got chills up my spine because I've never heard, like, I don't know how old everyone is here or like even.
He's 51.
You're 51. You're 51.
He looks amazing.
And you just said that like deeply in my heart. Like I wasn't expecting to hear 51-year-olds say that ever. I was only expecting to hear people under the age of 40 or even 35, 35. And like that moment of hearing you say that was kind of shocking to me because of your age. And I think that is like, as much as boys need to hear it from me, 22-year-olds need to hear it from me, 51-year-olds need to hear it from you so they can tell their sons, so they can have that conversation with their sons. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty in it, is the truth, and that is a testament to this podcast and the types of people you're bringing together and the differences in the people and the similarities. And you get everybody from every part of being human to tell their truth. And hopefully it gives somebody who connects with that one the option to tell theirs, But man, that's like so, and it is brave. It's brave. It's so brave. And it deserves to be called brave, like you're being brave to be vulnerable, to confront these things. Like it is bravery. And it's like, it breaks my heart because it's like the thing that you cannot say these things, like even sitting here, like the amount I have to breathe into this conversation, to be able to just let it flow, to be able to speak the truth, to be able to be okay with what I've already said. Like that is bravery. Like that is being a man, like, and that's the twist that you said on the thing in the book when you said you had to twist I'm going to be man enough to do this talk. It's just like now I'm thinking, that's so funny how I'm saying this because that is like the conversation we're having. It's using the word against itself. Yeah.
Right. And I'm so happy that you see that. And I think it's okay to acknowledge the things that we're congratulated as men for, right? Unjustly and sometimes justly, but the things that we're told make us brave are the very things that we're going to have to go up against and redefine for ourselves to then go inward in order to stop the cycle. It's like the only way.
Yeah.
And then it makes me feel like, so that we're acknowledging some bravery. Then it makes me think, I'm saying you're brave for certain things. You just said I'm brave for saying it. But then I'm thinking of how many women say that they've been raped.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
we don't call them brave.
Well, that was what I was going to say, you know, it's, well, not exactly. I appreciate that you said that, you know, that it to me, when you're talking about, you know, we need to redefine or undefine masculinity. We need to celebrate compassion, celebrate mindfulness. You know, we need to celebrate women who show those qualities, right?
That's
Because
right.
like and this is where your liberation is tied to mine. And the more we celebrate women who have the bravery to talk about sexual assault, to talk about rape, that liberates men to do it
That's
too.
exactly
And
right.
everyone, gender non-binary people, trans people, everybody. And one of the things I am gleaning, and I know we have to wrap, so maybe I'll never know, but it seems like your life is better, not worse,
Miles.
by looking and staring into that
Miles.
whatever darkness, whatever we call it, ego or ingrained masculinity that you don't want. And I think that's the part we really need to talk about. That men standing up for women does not take away from their freedom. It
right.
adds to their freedom.
It does.
Men letting go of the good guy identity or the bad guy binary. It doesn't just make your relationship, I'm sure, better in that moment and in the long run, but also it makes you happier, right? So I don't know. Am I
You're
right?
completely right.
Okay.
You're spot on, and I think that, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like the whole thing. I always feel like if we're fighting to be like dive in, and people are like, you don't. I guess we never really say that. We never really say like, hey, like by the way, if you dive in, it's going to be a little weird and dark, but once you get out the other side. I don't know if you ever really do get out the other side or what, but like once you get out, your life's better. Like there's your reward for diving in, you know, like you will feel better. You will be happier. And I guess I don't know, that's my goal in life is to be happy, is to find my happiness. And this is where it seems to lie, you know, and that is also coming from someone who has achieved a lot of material success, you know, whether it's money, whether it's fame, whether it's like any type of what you could read off of a list, none of that stuff has made me happy. It's the thing that's making me happy is really just kind of being there for myself and being able to be there for myself by diving into the darkness and having these conversations. And there's a lot of love in this room. You know, there's a lot of acceptance and a lot of caring eyes looking at you when you're telling your truth. That's not always the case for people. It's actually rarely the case for people, and we have to be open. That is what's happening. You know, most people tell somebody their truth and that person's looking back at them like, I don't want to hear this because I can't handle it, because I don't want to tell you my truth, you know? And so like, this is also something like, if you're listening to this podcast, don't wait for people to listen to this podcast. Go and give your friends those caring eyes they need from you, you know, if that's what this has done for you, because that's the only way the domino effect's going to happen, is if you give it to others, you know. And that's why I'm here, because someone gave it to me. I met you and you gave me love, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to give love out. And if we continue to give that domino effect, that's how you change the world, hopefully, you know, not
As
to be
Buddha
so
said, right?
you know, exactly.
One candle can light
all
thousands.
thousands, yeah.
Yeah.
And be willing to do the
Wow.
work. Because before we started, we had said like sometimes we go deep in, sometimes we keep it like cool,
Yeah.
you know, and then sometimes it gets intense on the table. And you said, I'm good with any of it.
There's one theme I want to talk about before we get off, and that is, you know, I talk about success in the book. This idea of being successful enough. You're 20, you're 22, and you've hit what most musicians will never, ever, ever experience. You're one of the most famous musicians in the world, and you have everything. And yet, what I find so fascinating about you in our conversations, not publicly, is how you have everything, yet the only thing that's lighting you up right now is your spirit, is
Totally.
is the thing that's nothing material, right? It's that idea of kind of letting it all go, detachment from the world. And I was wondering, are you in a place right now where if you lost it all, if, like you said, if tomorrow nobody would want to hear your voice or what you had to say,
Yeah.
would you still be happy? What's your journey with that? What's your journey with success right now?
Yeah, I think if what I say is true, then yes. If what I say isn't, then no. And I hope and I believe it's true in my heart, but I really will not find out until it happens. And I think there would be a part of me that would mourn the ability to have a voice.
Yeah.
Although we all have the ability to have a voice. It doesn't have to be to millions to have one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We all have one. And yeah, I think I feel like I have this insane amount of compassion and empathy for people on the other end of this listening right now, being like, I would be focused on everyone else and detaching from material things if I didn't have to work 2 jobs and provide for my kids to eat every night. Like, I have so much compassion for those people, and I want to know what to say to them, and I don't know what to say to them. And I am seeking those words, and I'm seeking those conversations, but I haven't found it yet. And yeah, I can take the rest of my life off. I'm good, you know? I don't have to work. That's not the case for everyone. And what can I say to those people? And how can I, you know, that's where I stand.
And the thing that's so interesting about many of those people who I have a lot of those people in my life, I'm very grateful that I have so many of those types of people in my life, is I've oftentimes found in my version of success, which is arguably less than yours in some ways, that they're happier than me.
Interesting.
And it's the people that are able to find joy and not have all this stuff and not have to like figure out how to reinvent. And it's not to say that everyone's like that. It's not. But I have also found that success can be a barrier to happiness. And that was kind of like what I was directing myself with you, which is because as men specifically, as a man, I'm fed the illusion that more success equals more happiness.
Of course.
And it's an illusion.
That's spot on.
So yeah, so we're fed the illusion as men, and I'm sure
And
there's
women.
an illusion, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of women, but as a man, I'm fed this illusion, and my dad suffered from it and suffers from it, and I know his dad did, that with more success comes more happiness, and then that's kind of what I was getting at, is you have all the success, and yet it seems like what's making you happy is going in. Do you think that happiness is linked to success?
Material success?
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. And I think Jim Carrey said it, and a million other celebrities and famous and rich people have said it. And I think that it's impossible to make somebody who doesn't have what you have understand what it feels like to have what you have, you know? And that's where I sit. And that's why I need people to see when I say it, look in my eyes when I say it, and be there in the room with me when I say it. So you can feel the truth from it. But, you know, not to go on about it too much, but like, I remember this chase for the next hit, this drive for the next hit. I would be I had a condo, I was 18 years old, and I would basically go from instrument to instrument to my computer to my kitchen, and I wouldn't eat. And I wasn't playing anything, I wasn't writing anything, I was just having anxiety about creating something that was another hit. And I would go months doing that. And I would go months not replying to my mom's phone calls or my dad's phone calls, and I would be desperately unhappy. The second I was able to like just start balancing, my happiness has just started flooding in so many ways. And there's nothing more convincing that I can give anybody. It's just, that's it. It's my experience has been chasing the material success left me very unhappy, and chasing whatever this other thing is.
Well, I'm happy that you had said, before we started, we were having a conversation on the couch. And we were talking about your beginnings and like the whole Vine experience and all that. And I had said something about your worth.
Yes.
And you had said, I know my worth is not in that.
Yes.
It's not in a hit or any of that.
No,
and that's really sweet to hear you say that stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Welcome to this week's Man Enough Podcast Rapid Fire Questions, presented in partnership with P&G, the maker of brands like Tide, Swiffer, Mr. Clean, Pantene, and Braun. All right, rapid fire questions.
Hit me. Here we go.
Rapid fire. Well, and they're thoughtful. It's not just yes or no answers.
They're good.
Want to start, Liz?
When was the last time that you cried?
It was probably like a week and a half ago. I'm trying to think of the exact experience. I think I was just like bringing up a trauma of mine in a very manly way, that wasn't very open or clear to who I was bringing it up to. And when I brought it up, it was kind of shut down to be not as substantial as their trauma was.
Oh.
And I felt like really unheard by that. And then it just kind of like, I didn't cry actually until we had the conversation about it. And then I was like, what's happening to me? I'm just like, these moments, it's like I said, these moments of something leaving your body. It's like, I think as men, like we don't cry, but when we do, it's like there's like, it's like a spiritual thing is leaving us.
Cleansing.
It's like crazy. So yeah, that was like a week and a half ago.
When was the last time you apologized to someone?
This morning to my girlfriend.
You want to share anything?
Yeah, sure. I think it was like the same raising my voice thing. I was downstairs and she left her yogurt outside, and I was like, I told her a few times, like, don't leave the yogurt outside because I really want to eat that yogurt. and then she was disappeared and she was upstairs, and I was like, the yogurt. And she was like, why'd you yell at me? I was like, I don't know.
Because I am excited about going on Justin's podcast.
I was like, I was eating the yogurt. Like, I just was like, all of the ego and all of the masculinity came in, and I was like, she didn't pick up her yogurt. Who does she think she is? I'm the king. And then I yelled, and that's the truth of what happened.
Good for you.
Yeah.
For acknowledging.
Always in the small things. It's in the yogurt.
It's in the yogurt.
Shows up in the yogurt.
It shows up in the yogurt.
You know, it's.
I'm gonna go off book for a second. What would your girlfriend say is your greatest and weakest strength?
My greatest strength, I think she would say, is my truth, like my ability to be honest and tell the truth. I think she would probably say my weakest thing is my commitment to being a good guy, like we talked about. And you put it into words actually that I've never been able to articulate. And I really appreciate that, because I think it's dead on. Committed to being only a good guy makes me a bad guy sometimes.
You're 90 years in the future and you are visiting your own funeral, right? You're a ghost at your own funeral.
Okay, I'm a ghost.
And everyone is there.
Yes.
To celebrate you.
Yeah.
What would you like to hear from them? What would you like to be remembered as? What would you like to hear?
I think that I have a deep knowing that I don't give people enough time as that they deserve, you know? And I've made massive changes over the last year to give that time to people. And I hope that they say he was always there when I needed him. That's kind of what would be the best thing I could hear, you know?
Good one.
And finally, what does it mean to be man enough?
Oh, I mean, I wish that you asked me this 2 days ago before I came. No, I mean, what does it mean to be man enough? I mean, well, this is the whole using the word against itself thing. I think you just got to be man enough to, like, my life, what's very relevant to me is it's really manly to mess up in front of people and be corrected. It's really manly to say the wrong thing and sit there through that uncomfort and admit you're wrong and then grow. That's like the manliest thing in the world, because nothing shakes my core more than being corrected and having to sit there. Take one of those and then keep having that conversation. So
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Thank you to our partners at P&G, the makers of brands like Tide, Swiffer, Mr. Clean, Pantene, and Braun, for helping to make the Man Enough podcast possible, and for sponsoring these fun and real moments with our guests.
Will you do me a favor?
Yeah.
You don't have to say yes now.
Okay.
Just in your mind.
Yeah.
You're so, there are so many boys and girls that love you. And there are so many girls that love you. And there are so many black girls that love you. Many that I know. So when you're doing your concerts and you're doing your stuff, I don't know where you stand in all this, but look at a black girl sometime.
Promise.
And let them know that you see them.
I hear you. I hear you deeply. Yeah.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
Shawn, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, guys.
My brother.
What an amazing opportunity and experience. Thank you.
Man enough.
Thank you.
You sure are.
I love it. I feel like I'm on a spiritual high.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, sir.
If you like what you heard, please check us out at manenough.com/podcast. We'll be right back with a little recap. I'm Justin Baldoni.
I'm Jamie Heath.
And I'm Liz Plank.
And this is
Man enough.